Hi, and welcome to Chapter 6, Learning Objective 2, where we're going to talk about price floors. So let me go ahead and share my screen with you. Come on. There we are. All right. So in this particular objective, we're going to talk about a price floor. Again, government intervention here. So I want you to think about price being like a ball. And what happens when you throw a ball? It hits the floor and bounces off. And that's essentially what a price floor is. So just as we looked at price ceilings being binding or non-binding, we're going to talk about price floors being binding or non-binding. So a non-binding price floor is when the price floor is below price equilibrium. So again, I'm going to kind of draw demand and supply. Find that price equilibrium and the quantity equilibrium. Currently, this graph, the market is efficient. So we're going to go ahead and put in a price floor. And I'm going to put this price floor, I'm going to put it right here. Again, it's like a floor in a room. And that means that prices cannot go below it. They can certainly be above it, and that's fine. I'll go ahead and put in some figures just to further our illustration a little bit. Let's say we have a $5 price equilibrium and $1,000 for quantity equilibrium. The government then comes in and sets a price floor of $3. Prices cannot go below the floor. The price is at $5, so that's perfectly fine. This market right here, this would be a non-binding price floor because it doesn't inhibit the market. And we would see no result of this particular price floor. So we would say, as an economist, this market is efficient. Now let's go ahead and draw a different scenario. And now we're going to end up with a bind. Wow, that was really bad. For some reason, I went totally sideways. I think I know why. So let's go ahead back. Wow, that's crazy. Okay, so now let's go ahead and draw. For some reason, I can just draw better over here. So there is the demand curve. Again, the supply curve illustrating the willingness and ability of suppliers, demonstrating the willingness and ability of buyers. Here's our price equilibrium and our quantity equilibrium. I'll go ahead and still set it at $5 with $1,000 being the quantity equilibrium. Now the government's going to come in and put in a price floor. And that price floor is going to be at $6. Now, prices cannot go below the floor. So what happens is when the price gets to $6, it stays there. This becomes a binding price floor. As economists, we would say this market is no longer efficient, particularly because here's the quantity demanded of something less than 1,000 units, let's say 800, and the quantity supplied is something much greater than the 1,000 units, let's say 1,200. Because the quantity supply is greater than the quantity demanded, we end up with a surplus, there you go, of 400 units. Again, make sure you put surplus and give me the amount of the surplus. So we don't like that, right? A surplus, it's really bad if it's a good that can't be stored, a non-durable good. For example, food might be one of them. Okay. All right, so here's a nice example, again, using ice cream cones, which is kind of crazy, in price floors. We tend to see it in agricultural goods a lot because, and I think I alluded to that in Chapter 5 at some point. So here again, we have the demand and supply in panel A. We want to look at this and say, okay, this is the price floor. Prices can't go below it, $2. And we would say that this particular one is in fact non-binding because prices can be above it, they just can't be below it. In B, the price floor is $4, price equilibrium is 3, therefore it's binding, and we end up with a surplus because the quantity demanded is 80, quantity supplied 120, we end up with a surplus of 40 units. Again, maybe not necessarily a big deal, but in ice cream cones, it'd be a huge deal, wouldn't it? Okay. So one price floor that we talk about a lot in economics would be the idea of a minimum wage. Okay. Okay, so let me go ahead and draw this. I know it's a little more macro in focus, but I think it'll make sense to you. So here's the labor demanded, and that would be by businesses, jobs. Okay, here's the labor supplied. That would be by households, supply of labor. Here would be the equilibrium wage. So I'm going to put W sub E. It's just a price, but it's really a wage because it's the demand for labor, supply of labor. And here is the quantity of labor demanded and supplied. Now, I'll give you a good example. In my business that I run, horse boarding, training, all of that, let's say that I get calls in the spring. This often happens to me, particularly in the spring. And I have some kids that aren't going to have anything to do over the summer, and they really think it'd be great to work at a horse farm. Well, they're actually even willing to do it for free. But let's say that I decide I want to pay them. And I'm going to pay them just enough that maybe I'm giving them some type of incentive, maybe. So let's say I want to pay them $5. And I have multiple 14-year-old girls that want to do this. And I want to pay $5, and they're willing and able to accept $5, right? They don't have a lot to do at 14. Now, many, many problems with this. And the main problem is minimum wage, right? So when we look at this, the wage, the minimum wage is actually a binding price floor. So in my case, this is what happens. Oh, come on, work with me. In my case, what happens is I'm willing and able to pay $5. I got 10, 14-year-old girls that are willing and able to do this for $10. However, because the government says, au contraire, mon frere, you must pay a wage minimum, right? There's two effects that happen. The first one is I no longer want 10 people because I have to pay substantially more. So let's say that I'm going to give them a little more than minimum wage. I'm going to give them $10. Now, at that point, I reduce the number of people I want, right? So this becomes the quantity of labor demanded. And yet, at the same time, the opportunity cost of sitting on your couch increases because maybe I'm willing to sit on my couch for $5, but I'm not willing to sit on my couch for 10. So the quantity of labor supplied increases. People say, hey, you know, I was discouraged. I didn't think I could find a job, but now I'm going to enter the labor force. So essentially what happens when we have a minimum wage increase from like 5 to 10 is we end up with unemployment. A lot of people worry about that the minimum wage will shoot up overnight to $15. I can tell you that's not going to happen. And the reason that's not going to happen is the government then cannot afford this many people being on unemployment because we know that the quantity of labor demanded will go way down the minute that you jump a minimum wage by dollars, for example. Okay. Now, again, the idea behind this, really kind of smart, is to ensure that everyone has a livable wage. Now, minimum wages are set by the state with a couple of exceptions. There is a federal minimum wage, and some states still follow that. So there are still states, even this is 2018, that are still paying $7.25. So again, we would argue is that even a sustainable, livable wage? And I would disagree that it's not. I mean, I would agree that it's not a livable wage. Okay, so France, average income is 30% lower than in the US. Minimum wage is more than 30% higher. And again, how does this affect the market for labor? When you put in a minimum wage minimum, okay, again, think of it as a price floor, is, again, the number of workers supplied, the quantity supplied increases, the quantity demand for labor decreases, And the difference between that becomes unemployment. Okay. All right. All right, so let's go ahead and look at our graphs, just kind of the difference. Again, we could have a minimum wage in a free market economy. That's my example of $5 and 10, 14-year-olds wanting to do it. Everybody's happy. But that's not legal, right? So essentially what we have is this binding price floor that the government sets called minimum wage, and it creates labor surplus or unemployment. And again, make sure you give me the numbers for that. Why? Well, again, the idea is everyone should have an affordable wage. Byproduct of that is what happens is those people, that type of jobs that pay minimum wage tend to be lower level, lower skill. And again, sometimes when we talk about that, there might be some issues that surround that. So we try to think about the socioeconomic status of people making minimum wage, and then you're going to go ahead and raise that. If you raise it too much at one time, you're actually hurting the target population that you're trying to help. Okay, so remember, kind of going back, economists, we think that markets are the best ways to organize economic activity. That's one of our 10 principles. Okay. And again, prices are not outcome of a haphazard prices or a process. So the idea here is that prices, as you'll see in the discussion post, are a way to ensure that those that value it most highly are able to get it. Those that can supply it most efficiently are able to do so. And again, that's kind of the mindset we're taking here. We're using the Adam Smith idea of markets, free market society, and the idea that everyone acts in their own self-interest. Okay, governments really do try to improve market outcomes. If we're setting a price floor for agricultural prices, we're doing it because we still want farmers to grow. But one of the byproducts that we see if we study this over time is that it really sometimes hurts those that it's helping, that it's trying to help. So some other ways we could do this would be subsidies as opposed to controls. Wage subsidies to help offset this as opposed to targeting the market specifically. All right, let's go ahead to look at an example. Here we have the market for hotel rooms, and we're going to evaluate a $90 price ceiling, a $90 price floor, and a $120 price floor. So let's go ahead and do, I want to match up some colors with this. So let's do A first. And remember, kind of the most important point to find these days is price equilibrium. That's going to be 100, and quantity equilibrium, and that's going to be 100. So this market is currently efficient. We have a price of 100 and a quantity of 100 as well. Now what we're going to do is go ahead and put in a price floor here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and, price ceiling here of $90. Price ceiling, I'm going to go ahead and draw that across. Price ceiling. Okay, is this ceiling binding or non-binding? It is binding, right? Because prices cannot go above the ceiling. So essentially, we have the quantity supplied at 90. We have the quantity demanded at 120. And we call that a shortage. And again, I need both parts of this. It's a shortage of 120 less 90, 30 units. Okay, so that's the effect of the $90 price ceiling. Let's go ahead to B and take a look at a $90 price floor. Again, just going to quickly put in that price equilibrium is 100 and quantity equilibrium is likewise 100. So let's go ahead and put in that price floor. Go ahead and do it red. $90 price floor. Price floor. Now, first thing, is this binding or non-binding? This is non-binding. So there's no effect on the market, right? Prices can be above it, they just can't be below it. Okay, let's go ahead and do the last one, C. $100. Okay, so let's go ahead and find our price equilibrium. P sub B is 100. Quantity equilibrium, 100. Let's go ahead and put in $120 price floor. Okay, so this is our price floor at 120. Price floor. Go ahead and put that in. First question, binding or non-binding? It's binding. That's correct. What's the effect? Well, here is our quantity demanded at 60 units. Here's our quantity supplied at 120. So quantity supplied is greater than the quantity demanded. We know that that is a surplus, right? The surplus here, 120 minus 60 equals 60 units. Now, for hotel rooms, a surplus of 60 units maybe isn't that bad, but again, these are things that you still have to maintain. So again, it can cut into costs as well. Okay, so here's our price ceiling. Shortage of 30 units, price floor, non-binding, no effect, and our price floor at 120, and that becomes a surplus. All right, so that is this objective. And we're going to go ahead and the next objective, objective 3, very, very short, just a brief introduction to taxes, where we're going to define a couple of terms which become important. And then we're going to show the effect of per unit taxes in the market. I have to show you the hard way, which you're not going to like. And then I promise I'll show you a really easy way to do it. The outcome you can use most of the time after chapter 6. You can use that easy way. So until next time, thanks. Have a great day.